Your hosts are the Great Order and No White Guilt, and this is the After Party. The crown winner of last week is K. Max McDonald, financially gifting $3. Thank you, dear brother. And a big congratulations to you. In second place, the one and only Azimuth Clark, financially gifting $1. Thank you, dear brother, and congratulations to you as well. Entropy will be up in a moment, where you may financially gift at a cost of 15% to you, which goes to the wonderful people over there at Entropy to keep that system up and running. You can also watch the stream over there, and you can vote on the questions. As you all know, Jared and I evenly share the financial gifts with our guests here on the After Party. Now, today we have that video maker extraordinaire everybody in the Going Free community knows and loves, Intellectual Embargo, on tap. Brother, please introduce yourself to anybody who may not know who you are. Tell them where they can find you, and then Mr. George will do the honors of taking us into the conversation.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I'm Intellectual Embargo. You can see my channel with that name on YouTube, but also I'm on Twitter, Gab, sometimes, BitChute, Odysee. And, largely I'm focused on making videos, things that are important to our people, concepts like biospirit. So I try and keep my videos shorter. Most of them are in like the 10 to 20 minute range, and they're the kind of things that you can just listen to, but I normally also have a lot of visual aids that do help if you prefer to watch.
Well, welcome and thank you for being here. I know Jason and you have spoken on Going Free, but this is the first time you were on the After Party, so I think everyone knows what that means. We like to have a little getting to know you session first. So if you could just start with anything you think is relevant that you'd like to share with the people listening about upbringing, and if you were always aware of what is going on, or if it was a slow awakening, or maybe you have had a before and after moment.
Yeah, so as far as my history, I grew up in a Midwestern suburb, right? So very white, very nice, lots of trees, boating, all the good things, going fishing. So largely I was not aware of what was happening in regards to biospirit and racial conflict and all the things that we're seeing. And, largely I stayed unaware for a very long time. I was fortunate as a child. I did get to travel a little bit, and even later as an adult, I got to travel. There is a program in the United States called People to People, created by Eisenhower to be ambassadors, like child ambassadors around the world. I was able to go to England. I went to London back when it was still very English, very English place to be. And I've also been over to Asia. I've been invited to weddings in India. I've enjoyed my time in India. Man, the food was spicy. I've been to Japan. I've been fortunate to travel around. And, largely even when I traveled, I still wasn't quite aware of everything that was going on. When I was a kid, I always thought, I'd like to live in Japan. I always thought, well, it's a very clean place. It's a very, high tech place. Back when we all had our Nokias, they'd have these these foldable smartphones that would have email. Well, not smartphones, but phones that had email and stuff on them. And I was like, they were always light years ahead of us, partly because their country is about the size of California, and only about 10% of it is inhabited, because most of it's very steep mountains, about 90% very steep mountains. So when you have such a densely packed population, there are like over 100 million people on less than 10% of the land of California, you can really afford to invest in like high quality wireless services, because you put up one tower and you reach just tons and tons of people. Like, it makes a lot of sense. in such a dense population. But anyway, so I was, for years I always thought, well, I'll go live in a foreign country, non-white country. I thought that'd be great, thought that'd be a good thing. I even visited there. I thought it would be a good thing. And then later, as an adult, I visited again. I said, well, I'm going to have to make a decision about where I'm going to live my life. I'll either live it here or back in America. And when I got there and I really thought more deeply about how they run their society and how I am as a person, I realized that that's not compatible deep down. Like, it's fine that they run their society that way. All the cultural norms they have, Köhne and Katamai, which I talked about in my video on bitter expats, this sort of public facing face that you have for everyone, and then your sort of own personal views that you keep much closer to your chest. In Japan, for example, forthrightness is not a big component to honesty. But in the Midwest, being forthright and open about your views is part of what we would consider to be honest. And to hold your views so close to your chest might be bordering on lie by omission here.
Right.
But ultimately, I came to the conclusion that our differences are large, so I don't belong there. It's a fine place for them as long as they like it. And then I came to the conclusion that by studying the science, ultimately, that, okay, it really is tens of thousands of years of divergent evolution that has caused at least some of these differences, some of the differences between the people.
I have a quick question to pop in.
Go ahead.
Because we love hearing these stories, and we've heard all kinds of versions. It's especially fascinating to me when we hear from people who have lived in non-Western cultures, who have spent significant amounts of time in non-Western cultures, because we are told that only the mainstream narrative, the narrative we get through the main organs of communication, education, is that only backwards, troglodyte, low IQ, scared, paranoid people care about their ethnicity and heritage. Only applies to people of European descent, of course. So you're a knuckle dragger. So you're a man of the world, well-spoken, obviously an intelligent person, and you've spent significant time in other cultures. And this is why I do what I do, we do what we do here, is to bring, not to confuse things, because sometimes when you have mass communication, you do need to be clear and not muddle things. But I am big on nuance, and that it's not just about, well, you're scared of other cultures. You could appreciate other cultures. In fact, because we're grounded in our own, when it's appropriate and when there's reciprocity and it's safe, we do advocate here, of course, enjoying the cultures. And I think you would agree with that as well. Having the right, it comes down to balance. And the narratives are so lopsided right now, and it's wreaking havoc on people. It's confusing people. So all that to say, I don't know if the program that you were involved in when you were a kid, I don't know if you were able to go off the reservation, as it were, or, for example, when you were in India, if it was all very buttoned up and you were staying in Western hotels and maybe you didn't really see some of the nitty-gritty stuff. Because I'm just curious if you could bring us a little more into countering that argument that it's only these scared, chauvinist in the old sense of that term kind of people that don't want this multiracial, multicultural march of globalism that we see the powers that be pushing. And also, as kind of a subset of that question, because we've heard other guests talk about this, that maybe, I don't know, like I said, if you did get to go off the reservation a little bit in places like India or elsewhere, evidence of the fact that even though we're told the opposite, as we know, people in this community know, us peoples of European descent are generally the least ethnocentric people in the world, the least likely to use epithets and rank people by skin tones and things like that. And they're obsessed with things like this in other places. Of course, this is used against us because we're told we're the most. But anything to say to that?
Yeah, so, well, and just for clarity, the people-to-people program that I did, that was only to Europe. So my time in Japan and India, that was Well, I did go to Japan with my school, but that was kind of more on my own.
I misunderstood that. Okay.
I'm also getting a lot of echo from you, Jared.
Let me mute for a moment.
Okay. So no, when I go to other countries, I like to really go to other countries. A lot of times I stay with families. I won't give a ton of details about the places I go for that reason, because I don't want some family in Japan to all of a sudden find out they're mixed in some weird political thing online, but or in India. I really like to walk or rent a bicycle and really go places. I'm not the sort of, well, I'll go to this statue and then this museum and this thing. I've been in the farm communities, I've been in the villages, I've been in the industrial sections that people miss. I will walk down, I remember one time I planned out a day. It was about 25 miles of walking. So it was a full day. It's just like walk, stop somewhere for lunch, walk, stop somewhere for dinner and get somewhere by nightfall kind of deal. But, if you walk along the coastline, you're going to naturally wander into where the fishermen live, where they run their businesses, some commercial ports, smaller, sometimes larger, sometimes parts are fenced off, you got to go around. But I really like to get in to the other countries. I'm not one to just I went to the Tokyo Marriott or something. I want to get out of there and really see what other cultures are like. I really enjoy other cultures. I really love seeing their art, nurimono, sort of these lacquered. I love the Japanese lacquered wear or lacquerware stuff. But when you're out really walking in their communities, you get to see what the businessman's power lunch looks like. You get to see the women with their children, strapped to their back, going out to the market sort of thing. You get to know kind of what their life is like, and you miss out on all of that if you just, go from tourist trap to tourist trap or, museum to whatever. But, you definitely do have that stereotype, the stereotype that, well, the only white person who would ever want to preserve their people and their culture is someone who is unworldly, right? And the way we cure them is just to send them out and enjoy the company of others more. But yeah, you have people like Jared Taylor, who, backpacked across the world. I mean, a lot of the people I've talked to, including, I've done streams with American Krogan. A lot of us have been around the world. American Krogan's living in South America. I mean, we have a lot of experience, and that's part of how we know how much we like our own people. It's like we know what it's like to not have access to our own people and not have access to our own culture for extended periods of time. We know what it's like to be away from home, and we don't take it for granted so much anymore.
I just want to jump in really quickly, because that is exactly, we have so many people. I've gone blurry. I'm blurry, but it's not because the computer's been drinking alcohol. There you go. We can't figure it out, but maybe we will at some point. Nevertheless, this is what's often talked about over the years in the white sympathetic sphere, is that the most traveled folks have a very keen awareness of the biospirit of Western kind, and that there are very different biospirits among the races, and that they can travel around the world to countries that were created and are maintained and envisioned by people with different biospirits. They can appreciate the things that are there that are worthy of appreciation, and yet they still feel that it's something alien to what is their instinct. And then when they return, and everybody refers to this the same way, they return, they say they now have a frame of reference. Now they can actually identify the biospirit of the West. Now they can see it, whereas before traveling to all of these different countries, they had a difficult time really seeing the differences. But I'll just pass it back. I just wanted to toss that in.
Yeah, Jason, doesn't it definitely reflect the guests that we've had on that have had the chance to travel extensively or live extensively in non-Western cultures? They seem to have different versions of this, but come to the same conclusion. Did you have any many juicy stories before we go on to kind of illustrate these differences, or speak to what I said earlier about the fact that even though we're told the opposite, that we are generally the least ethnocentric people in the world, and that I know in places like India, there's a keen awareness of how they class different ethnicities and skin tones and things of that nature.
Well, I know when I was in India for the most recent wedding, I mean, there were some conversations about caste, right? Because the two families don't exactly have the same historical origins here, right? For their marriage. They were close enough where the marriage still went through. But there was talk about that throughout India. That was very, very common to talk about. And, you know, I remember when I was in Japan, you know, I had, because I walked around on the coastline, and you'd have these old men, they'd like to fish. You know, it's like part of their retirement plan for old men out there. They just love going to the coast and fishing, and they'd wave me down. You know, it'd be like, juice and nominai, you know, like, won't you have a drink with me? And they'd have like these little canned coffees and stuff. And they'd, you know, they're waving me down because I'm white, you know. They're not waving down every young man walking along the beach. They see me, they know that I'm not them, and they want to see where I'm going. And I'm not offended by that at all. But, you know, in the reverse, it's often a thing, you know. If you're in a small all-white town in North Dakota and some clear outsider walks through, if you were to wave them down and be like, hey, where are you going? You know, even nicely, it would not be appreciated. As I don't know if I have any great stories about the ethnocentrism differences, but I do, I mean, I've definitely seen the statistics on it. One of the things you see here in the United States is that the whites who, you know, so there's some problems with implicit bias testing in science. There's some problems with it. But if we just sort of put the problems aside, the whites who have the most sort of biases in regards to non-whites are the ones who live closest to them, right? So like the whites who tend to have the strongest opinions on blacks, for example, tend to live in the Southeast, where they encounter the most blacks. Like it seems to be the whites as a default, when they're just among themselves, they're very sort of open. They're not really concerned with being white for white's sake and what that means for Western civilization. They just, well, again, they take it for granted. And my travels around the world is what allows me to not take it for granted anymore.
What about the other side of this coin too? Because you spent time in Europe. I've spoken a little about, I felt a keen awareness of being part of a continuum when I was there. Did you anything to say to that put into sharper focus your connection to where you come from?
Well, I'd say most of my traveling to Europe was actually before my traveling other places. So I'd like to go back again to see how it feels again. But it was always more like, I like going everywhere. You know, I don't mind not knowing the rules in a foreign country, like in Japan, where they're very different and needing to ask and having to do it their way. But certainly, you know, when I stayed with a family in England, while the house was a lot different than American houses, some of the, you know, things were much older. They didn't have refrigeration at the time. You know, there was a stronger sense of, you know, a lot of the differences really are superficial. You know, the differences in their kitchen, the differences in how the town was. It's like, yeah, they're driving on the different side. Yeah, they use these words instead of these words, but, you know, it wasn't substantively different than what I remembered in the Midwest.
Right. Now, what brought you to realize that you needed to step out and do something? Take us through how you were a guy in this nice Midwestern town. You had a taste for traveling. You had a good, healthy balance of what your perspective was on it. But how do you go from that to, wow, like something is really wrong in the world. There's attacks on our people psychologically, physically. This is being promoted through all organs of media and education and policy. And I have to do something about it and start a channel and start talking about it, add my voice to it.
Yeah. So I'd say what I really saw was, at one point, what I was going for was let's all be equal. Let's all be in this together. Let's try and make our country together, even though it was a multiracial country. Let's all, work for a common goal. Let's all push the boulder in the same direction. Let's go to space. Let's make America the best ever. And what I continuously saw is that non-whites had racial grievances for why they didn't want to be on my side. They didn't want to go to space. They needed reparations. They didn't want, and we see that even in the 60s. There was big protests saying, mostly African Americans saying, pointing out differences in funding between NASA and welfare programs at the time. So I was like, well, let's drop our racial ties. Let's drop our ethnic ties. Let's all join together. Let's be Americans. Let's do this. And what woke me up is time and time again, I only ever saw whites coming up to push the boulder. You'd go to, let's say, a libertarian conference where they have a lot of strong ideas. There's a decent amount of civic nationalism. This belief in American exceptionalism, our own greatness, and what we can achieve with a hope for the future. And it was a sea of white faces. I remember John McAfee said something to the effect of, he went to a libertarian conference, it was so white, and then he added something to the effect of, shame on you, as in like, well, if other people don't show up at the table, I don't know how that's shame on us. That just struck me as hateful of white people. And as time went on, I just thought, gosh, a lot of the stuff here seems to be motivated by racial animus towards whites. White people are clearly not in any way defending themselves. There are white kids going to school being taught to dislike themselves by their teacher, and their parents aren't like inoculating their kids against this before they go. Well, I've just came to the conclusion at one point that, well, if I don't, no one will. Or more correctly, I might explain it in a way someone else doesn't. I knew when I learned about, for example, Jared Taylor, I said, okay, well, he's doing it. But that doesn't mean I can just leave everything to him. There are people who I've talked to who agree with you and me, and for one reason or another, they don't like Jared Taylor's personality. It's like, okay, seems like a great guy, but that's fine. Maybe if I make a video, maybe if I write an article, maybe I'll write it in a different way. Someone that'll reach someone else who Jared, for whatever reason, can't reach, or Jason can't reach. So I thought I better just throw my head in the ring, because I have you're my people. I mean, if there was ever a point for me to make an effort, it would be for you guys. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing it.
Well said. Yeah, it's important. We all have different roles, but for those of us who do choose in some capacity to step out and be public, I think we probably all have had that thought to ourselves of, well, what am I really going to add here? And I say this to anyone listening who is thinking of participating in some way. It doesn't mean that you have to be a video maker and put your face out, but some kind of public advocacy you think to yourself, am I just contributing to the cacophony, or is it an ego thing? But really, what has been wonderful to see and flowering here over the last couple of years is that with each different personality that steps out and does something publicly, then there's a whole bunch of people who resonate, as you were saying, with their particular personality, how they speak, how they look. We can break down some of these things, but some of them are just very instinctual and subconscious. Because let's face it, there's nested layers of how people relate to one another. And while what we're talking about, our ethnic heritage, is crucial and it's a big part of it, we're also, especially us European peoples, there's a lot of varieties, strong personalities, individualistic, and you're going to tend to flock to those who speak like you and view the world a little bit and have your constellation of personality traits more or less. So it is crucial that we see that kind of thing going on, especially because, as we say here all the time, as Jason and I both together and in our own ways separately have been working towards being part of, not that we're the only ones, but part of really fanning the flames of a culture here. It's not just political commentary. It's not just YouTube videos. We're, as I like to say, we're living life. We're not doing politics. That's a subset of it. But bigger picture is that we're living our lives together. So you need technical people and artists and political commentators and writers and all kinds of things. So it's a point that we make here all the time, and I'm glad that you said it. So I know, like me, you're kind of big picture. So what are some of the themes of your videos for people that haven't seen them? What is that particular tack that you take, that you offer?
Let me jump in just very quickly. Hold your thought there, brother. I just wanted to speak very briefly to this. When so many of our brothers and sisters, and I've had this happen so many times, and i.e. just alluded to it just moments ago. And so I've had this conversation so many times, and it's such a misattribution that I see among our people. And I think it's a consequence of growing up in the anti-white narrative, of being infected with the mean pathogens, is that when our brothers and sisters travel abroad, and they go and they see these, when I say travel abroad, I don't mean other Western countries, but I mean what are effectively, and this gives a hint to the direction I'm going, Westernized non-white countries. Because there isn't a non-white country on planet Earth that has not been heavily influenced by Western civilization and who and what we are for various reasons. And so what would these countries actually look like? What would their people, I think we've almost been, I guess, if you wanted to take a view from Mars down on planet Earth, perhaps history has been robbed of what these different non-white biospirits, what they would have actually looked like. Maybe it wouldn't be the same sort of technology. Maybe it wouldn't be the same way of life at all. When we go back in history, and we look at recorded history, the furthest back we go, I mean, we're having contact with non-white cultures, non-white peoples, and influencing them from all of our travels and victories and combat and the like, influencing everything that they do. And so what ends up happening is when our brothers and sisters travel abroad, they end up in a country that is a non-white country, and then they see the pieces of it that look familiar to them. And those pieces are really just our influence. It's the same thing that happens when you look. I had a conversation with a guy, and I just very briefly will say, many years ago, and he said he was making the argument about being attracted to a non-white woman. And I argued that his attraction for her was actually for the features in her that were clearly given her by way of white ancestors. She was not fully non-white. So he disagreed, and I went and found a photograph of a great example of a woman of that, not that race, not someone who was was one of their ugliest members by no means, but was one of their absolute more attractive members. And I said, well, what do you think of this one? And he immediately knew that he had lost the argument, that indeed he was attracted to the Western white features in the non-white woman that he was attracted to. And it wasn't the absence of those things. It was the presence of those things. So yeah, I think this happens all the time. And I think we need to mention it to our brothers and sisters, that when they go abroad, they see things and they say, it's just about the same. It's just, there's really no, well, that's because Western kind went all around the world and has influenced everything. That's why. That's why there's so much similarity. Who knows what these places would have looked like? They might have looked beyond our wildest fantasies had we had no contact with them whatsoever. But please, Intellectual Embargo, and Jared, you have something to say there.
Well, no, of course I want to give the floor to our guest. I was just saying, you reminded me. I've never said this on our show before. It's a brilliant point. When I was a kid, I had a sense of this, even though I couldn't articulate these things. Like the nascent sense of this was in Japan, where IE mentioned himself. I thought of the fact that Japanese businessmen wear business suits that look just like ours, but I knew that couldn't have always been the case. And that's just one silly example where you see pictures of a city in China. We saw some of those last year, right? And it's the roads look kind of similar, and it's the cars. We developed those cars. So very well, that's a point that is so obvious, but should be said more so. I actually want to say, Intellectual Embargo, before we get to the question I had posed about your take on things and how you approach things kind of in a meta way, I want to just make sure you don't have anything to add to what Jason said there.
Well, the only thing I would say is that I think that's partly, when our people travel abroad to non-white countries, part of the reason they pick up on some of the superficial characteristics that we share in common is because they have a more superficial way of traveling in some way, like because they are like going to the Tokyo Hilton and going to the KFC, which they have lots of over in Asia, lots of KFCs. When I was in Japan last, I was there with a mom and a dad and their children, and I lived in their house. And when I go abroad, I deep dive because I really want to see it for real. And then the superficial differences or the superficial similarities about, like, well, look, there's still some of the same stores here. There's 7-Elevens all over the place. Yeah, well, once you live with their kids and you see how they raise their kids and you see the way, the family works, and you go and visit the grandparents and you have dinner there, all of a sudden those superficial similarities start to melt away, and you can start to see, this isn't how I want to raise my family. No, and I'm not saying that because I don't like I'm not saying it's bad the way they do it. I'm saying they're different than me, clearly. And for anyone who wants to hear more about, I've got a couple videos about Japan, and I worked on one that's got really nice editing with American Krogan. Bitter expats should return home. It's something like that for the title. And I use the example of a white person who goes to Japan, finds how different it is, and is really bitter about the differences, and sort of harms this local community with always being chafed by how different it is there. But then I bring that home and I talk about, well, you got a lot of people doing that here in the West too. It's bad when they do it to us, and there's a lot of them doing it to us.
I have another question to add on to this subject, maybe a little bit in the direction of the ethnocentric question I had asked at the beginning. When you were staying with these families in Japan or India, was there ever a moment when, even if it was in the most polite, benign way possible, the father or someone else made sure you knew that you were not one of them? Did they ever have to assert a boundary with you?
Well, they didn't, I don't think, largely because I never insisted the lack of boundaries. I never went in there saying, oh, well, it's all just skin color, man. I'm just like you, you got to let me in. I was never insistent that they need to let me in. I mean, I'm from the other side of the world. So
It's very
that never
clear
happened
you
to
were a
me because I never
guest.
pushed that boundary ultimately.
Yeah, it was just implied that you were a guest.
Oh, yeah. They were happy to have me for only the amount of time that they agreed to have me.
Right. Did they ask you a lot of questions about how things are done in the West, in America specifically? What
Oh,
kind of
yeah. I
curiosity
mean,
did they have about us?
when I'm in India for weddings and stuff, they want to hear all about our marriages and our weddings and the role of men and women in our relationships. And, and when they find the differences, they're interested to hear about them. And I'd say more often than white people, they'll judge them harshly. Like they'll even sometimes say to your face, like, "Oh, that's stupid. Why do you do it like that?"
Right.
While when white people hear about the way they do things in, I don't know, a Maasai tribe, they don't say, "Well, that's dumb." It's like they're a little bit more forthright with saying that our way is bad.
Well, our people have been infected with poisons. And
Yeah.
that's just one expression of it. So yeah, it sounds like okay. So we did get some more of the ethnocentrism through that. Weddings are an interesting example as well. I did a video about that a couple of years ago because being such a life marker, a milestone in people's lives, weddings are one of those things where if an ethnoculture is strong, there will be many signs of that ethnoculture on display at a wedding. I would imagine that an Indian wedding, and I know there's different cultures, subcultures, sub ethnicities within India. It's not a monolithic thing, but you're going to see the dress, the music, the statuary, the decorations on the wall. Maybe when the best man or the brother of the bride or groom gets up to speak, they're referencing famous lovers in Indian mythology or fairy tales or folklore that goes back hundreds or even thousands of years. Compare that to the average American, Australian, Western European wedding, where basically you hire a DJ and you listen to some pop music. There's no ethno-cultural markers, or at least not as many on a general scale from what I've seen. If someone's been to a different kind of wedding than me, then let me know. And I'm not saying this to insult any of my friends or family whose weddings I've been to who may listen to this one day, but I just focused on that as one very poignant marker of if you're going to have your ethnoculture on display, it would be when two families join together, when man and woman come together to start a family together and join in marriage. And a lot of ours aren't. Now we're told this is a slippery slope because then someone will use that as an example to say we have no culture. But it's been beaten out of us, or as you just indicated, i.e., we're so many of our people are so hesitant to assert even the faintest whiff of that sort of thing. So I'll pass it back to you. You're our guest. You can comment on that, or we can get right into kind of the frames and perspectives that you take in your videos.
Well, I'll just mention real quickly that I think the thing is, of course, we do have a culture. Some of those elements that used to exist in some of our weddings and whatnot have, for one reason or another, not been showing themselves recently. And that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of white people look at their lives and the weddings and they feel it's kind of hollow, because it has been hollowed out, right? So it's time to bring it back. We don't need, this sort of notion that, well, non-whites have authentic things and we have inauthentic things. No, we have authentic things. We need to maybe reintroduce some of what we lost and fill it up again.
Yeah, I said it's a slippery slope. The other element of it, as you indicated as well, it's been running throughout this conversation, Jason and I talk about often as well. There are ethnic markers that are so close to us, it's like water to a fish. So it's regional too. You might see certain things, certain foods at a southern wedding, southern United States, and that is absolutely an ethnic marker, the way that they do that, or a dance that they do. But it's so close to most people, they don't even recognize it.
Right.
But I'd still say on the whole that we could probably, if more of us were healthier, and once we do all go free of the poisons and mean pathogens, I think you'll naturally see those kinds of weddings and all the different ways we mark and celebrate our lives spontaneously spring up with a lot more of those ethnic markers. And you're right, it's why people feel hollow. It's why we look to other cultures as being quote unquote authentic and in touch with nature and interesting and vibrant and spicy. I mean, it's just a number has been done on us, and we're here to help with the healing. But on that note, I know you're big picture. You like to talk about language. So why don't we speak a little about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think language is very important. I think it's linked heavily. It's almost entirely overlapped in some ways with thinking. The words you have access to help determine the thoughts you have access to, and that's why I've really appreciated Jason's work with the language. I've heard some people, they've said some things, they've had some criticisms, and when I've thought, and I'm a critically thinking guy, or at least I like to think I'm a critical thinker, so I looked at a lot of Jason's work with terms on anti-whiteism and stuff like that, and I have a number of handwritten pages on well, if we were going to make something better, what would it look like? And man, it was not easy. These terms have clearly had some thought into them. And I think these sorts of terms are the ones we're going to have to use because they're more accurate, they provide clarity, and they're a very useful tool. One of the biggest ones is anti-white and anti-whiteism, which is absolutely critical. You see various whites around the world, South Africa, United States, they're dealing with all sorts of superficially different problems. A lot of the times it's the same root, and it's really anti-whiteism. And, I've thought a lot of an example, if you, instead of thinking of in terms of anti-white and anti-whiteism, if instead you think of an adversarial ethnic group or an adversarial race, and you say, well, they're the problem. Well, that's that one, it's less accurate, and two, it's very temporal, right? So if you're a South African and you had, let's say, a young South African man growing up there, and he didn't believe that anti-whites are a risk to white people, and he didn't believe that anti-whiteism was a risk to white people, and instead he believed black people are bad or something stupid like that. Well, let's say he flees as a refugee to some other part of the world, and now there's no black people there. Well, now he's free, right? He can now rest on his laurels. There's no problem now. He can send his kids to school with no concern for what they're going to learn. No, he could easily be sending his kid, in Maine, very nice white area, to teachers who are going to teach his kid to hate himself for being white, or hate herself, or feel guilty for being born white. If he incorrectly understands his adversaries to be a particular ethnic group or race, even if we were to say that one ethnic group was very high in anti-whiteism, so it's kind of true, it's only going to be true for so long. We really need to engender language that's going to protect our people for generations, because that's what we're in. We're in a multi-generational struggle for the soul of our people. So I think the language here is absolutely critical in terms of what it can provide. And also, my other big thing is I'm always thinking about what sort of language can be easy to adopt. There's a lot of anti-whites who have fairly easy to adopt languages, like white privilege, that term. I mean, it's sort of obvious on its face what it means. It means that white people are born with this thing and they're guilty of having it. It's pretty obvious. But the thing is, if they want, they can enforce more sort of complex terms, because they got 4 years of college to hammer it in. They got most of high school and middle school and even elementary school in now to hammer some of those ideas in. A lot of our terms have to be so easy to pick up that it's just a few memes. It's just a 5-minute conversation where you can arm someone with an idea like biological white erasure or multiracial harmonization. These sorts of things have to, it has to be something that you can just pull out of your pocket and hand to someone within seconds. Can't put it in a college course. It's got to be simpler. It's got to be more apparent than that. So I'm always, when I'm hearing these terms provided by Jason or other people, I'm always thinking, okay, is it the sort of thing I can just hand to someone as like a really basic tool, like a hammer, and they'll just kind of get it. They'll just kind of get how to swing it. So I think the language is absolutely critical.
But Jason, you're muted. I don't know if you're saying something.
Well, I absolute agreement. And Intellectual Embargo folks, follow him on all of his channels. He is 100% right. This is a brilliant gentleman, and he's doing a magnificent job. Not only is he right on the points that he's making, these are fundamental. These are seminal type of thoughts. You go from being in the right place and asking the right questions, then you have a possibility of getting to the right answers. And that is what he is demonstrating, and demonstrating a great deal of rationale and logic in everything that he's saying. His sentence constructions, as he spells this out, demonstrate high intelligence. It demonstrates that it's a very logical path. You don't see this very often throughout the white sympathetic sphere, but you're seeing it here. Not only is he equipped to disembroil the riddles that the anti-whites are putting before us, and to then ask the right questions and then get to the right answers, but he is a magnificent video maker, and he has fantastic videos, criminally underrated, a superb delivery, superb verbiage, scripts that he uses, and they're also visually entertaining. Make sure you follow him on all of the channels that he's on. Of course, he's on YouTube. That's the only one I will recommend. But if he's on any others, then you want to make sure to follow him there as well, because there are going to be there have been videos, fantastic videos that he's made that have been taken from YouTube by the anti-whites. For what reason? Because they are effective. So make sure you follow him everywhere, and they're going to be up in the places where we normally put those things. But I just wanted to jump in and say that as we continue. And folks, if you do have any questions, comments, suggestions, financial gifts, get them in now. And we're definitely going to be having IE back soon in the future. But Mr. George, you were ready to roll on to the next.
No, I'm just agreeing. It's a pleasure. You're a gentleman to speak with, IE, and we have to do this more often. When I stop speaking, I'm about to put the link to the last message to the West video contest entry from Intellectual Embargo. Some of you may know me and our good friend Australia's Lovely Porridge. We hosted a video contest a couple of years ago. It's going on 2 years, Jason, if you can believe it, this October, November. If you had 5 minutes to have the world's attention, one last message about why we do what we do. And our guest here had a great video to the sons and daughters of Europe. I'll put that in the chat. And as Jason said, get your chat questions in. We're not here too much longer. Super chats or regular questions, tag us, especially Jason he's keeping an eye a little bit more than I am on the YouTube chat. But as you think of some questions to our chat, to our audience, we just wanted to bridge what you were saying, i.e. about language and the importance of it, to maybe some examples you've seen recently or things you've spoken about in your videos about the psychological warfare that goes on every day, what you've observed in media, and also video games. We've been trying to get someone on who could speak to video games as well, and I think from what I saw of your content, you addressed that. So anything you'd like to highlight with the media messages?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. I've do a lot of video game streams, or at least I did a little bit ago. So for anyone who's followed my channel, I haven't done any streams or videos in the last couple months here, moving across the country. I'm still not settled in. It's been crazy. I want to get back to the videos and the streams soon. There's lots of terrible messaging in video games. A lot of it has to do with history or pseudo history, really sort of demonizing our people. But I'll tell you what, I've been really obsessed with this new Disney movie. You know, I don't normally watch movies, but the new Disney movie is absolutely astonishingly anti-white. Um, I don't normally watch movies. I was selling the house, right? So I had to be kicked out of the house for 3 or 4 hours for all these showings. So I'm like, well, I'll go to the movie, and I saw Jungle Cruise, and wow, I mean, it had everything in terms of, you know, you have your protagonist, you have that evil voice coming from off screen. It's a German's accent. You have the other bad guys, they're Englishmen, and the other bad guys are Spaniards, right? All the bad guys from all around Europe. And oh man, I remember in that particular movie, The Rock is in it, Dwayne Johnson, and he was with the Spaniards. You find out, and you go, "Oh my gosh, were you one of the bad guys?" And then you find out, well, actually, his father's from Algiers. He's from North Africa, and he fought the Spanish. He wasn't really with them. Oh, good. So he wasn't really bad, and he's not really white. So the big thing about video games is you can get a lot of the same sorts of messaging in video games, but the play times are always longer in video games than movies. So the frequency of messaging in someone's life is much higher. Rather than a 1 hour or 2 hour movie, you know, most video games, like an RPG, something you play offline on your own, I mean, most of those stories, the storylines, I mean, you're expected to play that for, you know, I don't know, at least 15 hours for some of the shorter games and 40 hours for the not short games. So it's like you're going to play this every weekend for the next couple months. And it's going to hit you with the same messaging over and over and over. And also, I think there's something very powerful about video games when it comes to choice and the illusion of choice. If it's presenting you with an option where it's like, well, you can, you know, kill the evil German, and it's your choice to do it, and there was no other real choice for you, it's a false choice, the illusion of choice, it really becomes stronger for you to identify with the ideas because you picked it after all. I mean, it was a false choice, but you picked it. And I think that's a really big deal. And I'd like to see better video games that have healthy ideas, that don't demonize the white race. I'd like to see video games that don't demonize anyone. But a lot of them are going with the pseudo-history route. They will depict, of course, World War II very, very popularly, but also like westward expansion. There's been games set in the Old West and colonial America. And yeah, they're not very flattering to our side, but they'll very much gloss over anything anyone else did that may be sort of sketchy.
That is, it's so telling. And I was actually, I know gamers, they were really upset, obviously, and they continue to be really upset as anti-whiteism gets injected into the gaming world. But it was that environment was preserved for so long. For the most part, of course, there were, from the very beginning, there were obviously elements of anti-whiteism, but nothing like it's been over the past couple of years. I'm hearing I can't actually play video games because the 3D animation in most of them makes me quite ill. But I was pleased to hear that the anti-whites started going hard there. This seems to me, and I get your thoughts on this, i.e., this seems to me to be this nanny state, anti-white, control every single thought, control every single moment of a person's life, because any reprieve from anti-whiteism is an opportunity to think for oneself, is an opportunity to note these the difference between the anti-white narrative and the reality that one lives when they unplug, they walk outside, they see what's actually going on. You know what part of town you can't go to and why, and etc. Is what you're seeing, all the way from, I mean, it's almost like cradle to grave, isn't it? all of your entertainment, all of your education, everything anti-white, everywhere you go, all the time, and that it's getting increasingly difficult to find a moment in even the gaming worlds to escape anti-whiteism?
Yeah, I'd say that's the case. I mean, you've had organizations like the ADL putting pressure on Steam, who's the largest sort of video game distribution platform there is on Earth. So, I mean, they're definitely trying to make sure that you don't have anything other than anti-whiteism to consume in terms of media and stuff like that. That being said, on the other side, I think this is sort of the last refuge for a lot of ostriches who have put their heads deep in the sand, and finally it's going to be shoved in their face in a way where they're going to have to come up for air like the rest of us, and maybe talk about some of these things. So I think it's also, in some ways, I think they're going to overplay their hand. But again, this is a multi-generational struggle, right? People, when we get in these conversations, everyone's like, "Oh, so what you're saying is that it's all right around the corner." It's like, well, no, it's not that easy ever.
Well, Jason, do we have any questions or comments from the live chat?
Well, we do indeed. A lot of people are very excited about intellectual embargo, as we are, Jared. And we want to see him get settled wherever he's going to be and then start making a bunch of more videos. And remember, folks, this is a community in which this is a life or death struggle in which you must participate. When you are engaged in the practice of going free, you're not there to just be dazzled by intellectual embargo's videos and nod assent the entire time and think, wow, that guy's really got it. He's got it figured out. He's right. And then you go back and you just go through your life producing and consuming. We're out of time. The anti-whites have won. They dominate all of Western civilization. There's nothing they don't dominate. And the nodes of power in their hands are so many, the percentage is so high. There is no hope of any sort of reclamation by any of the means that has been used or that have been used in the past. We need to reclaim our destiny by way of reclaiming our identity. And this is going to be through, one, primarily a psychological defense to the psychological warfare that is waged against us, and two, the creation of our own culture. We will be that juxtapositioned scenario where our brothers and sisters, ordinary men and women and children out there across the West, they look out at the decay, they look out at the corpse of Western civilization, and they say, well, what is left here that is good? And then they see us. And as a consequence, since we are projecting as best we can who and what we are biospiritually, instinctually, and that we are a movement of love, hope, and redemption, that they will come to us, and by changing the milieu, changing the environment in which the conversation about what's going to take place with anything in the world, by changing that environment, we recapture our destiny. And we've demonstrated that now more times than is countable. We continue to have victory after victory. We continue to have people who object to us and oppose us, speaking out, panicking, freaking out about the success that we're having. There's a group of people, they've figured it out, and they're changing things, and they don't like that. And not only have we figured it out, this is purely out of intelligence and our will, because we don't have the money. We're not printing the money. We don't have any multi-millionaire financial backers or anything like this to make these things happen. So we are actually doing this with intelligence and will. That's something that will go down in the history books. Will you be in those pages? Well, if you're just watching what we're doing here and what Intellectual Embargo does, no one will remember your name. The only way you're going to be remembered is if you contribute, if you participate. What might your participation look like? What might it look like today versus what might it look like 5 years from now? Well, if you're not doing much right now, something you can do right away is you can become a subscriber to all of Intellectual Embargo's channels. And then you can go out to First Amendment groups, Second Amendment groups, constitutionalist groups, libertarian groups, MAGA groups, America First groups. You can go everywhere with this man's content, all of the time and effort that he's put in, and share these videos like there's no tomorrow. And when you do, of course, remember to use the 5 key concepts when you speak with the people. You don't have to be actually engaged in the practice of going free. If you don't have time for that, you're still don't know whether or not you want to take that leap. Make sure you say anti-white, anti-whiteism, anti-white narrative, Western kind, white erasure. Those are the 5 key concepts. You'll be doing a world of good, but you need to get started. Magnify what Intellectual Embargo has done by subscribing to him on all of his platforms and networks, and then sharing his work everywhere. Otherwise, no one will remember your name. And we come over here to Entropy, and the great Yiz the Eunuch is with us first. A great champion doing amazing things in service to white well-being. Financially gifting $3. Thank you, sister. And she writes, busy working and can't visit today, but wanted to folk tithe for the great Intellectual Embargo. May all our gods bless him and his great work. And she gives us a little white heart emoji. Thank you so much for those wonderful words for our guest today and this great champion from Yiz the Eunuch. We have Slots, another champion, financially gifting $5. Folks, these are the people who are going to be remembered. Your family won't even remember you if you don't do something glorious when the hour called for heroism. Just think about that for a minute. If you just want to become worm food, then you were born with your mother straddling your grave. Slots financially gifted $5. Thank you so much, good brother. And he writes here, good show. We really appreciate that, Slots, and everything you do for white well-being. Folks, get out your raucous emojis and get them riled up, because Hallander has financially gifted $100. God bless you, brother. Thank you so very much. A very talented individual. And here financially gifting $100, saying everything he wanted to say with that $100, just putting a little dash in the place where he could have written something. Thank you so much, Hallander, great champion. Zero Talent has financially gifted another champion $20. Thank you so much, and wonderful to see you again, dear brother. Writes, finally found a woman who is excited to have lots of white babies. He writes, please pray for us that we have many healthy and strong kids. Let's go free. Well, God bless you. That is great news. God bless the both of you. Yeah, and make sure that they are going free. Inoculate those white babies. Can you imagine the children that come out of couples who are going free? Can you imagine how absolutely amazing they're going to be? They're going to be gods compared to us. Well done. And thank you so much for the financial gift, brother. Jacob, financially gifting $5. Thank you so much, Jacob. He writes, Intellectual Embargo takes on video games. His take on video games is very accurate. You are what you consume, and people consume video games for an extended period. It is also the medium consumed by young white men the most. Thank you very much for that, Jacob. And IE, do you have anything to say in response to Jacob's comment?
I mean, he's right. I mean, we're definitely young white guys are playing video games in huge amounts. A lot of them are agitated by some of the anti-white stuff they're seeing. But the biggest players who have the most money to produce sometimes some of the best made games are anti-white. Yeah. So if you do see cult games, Hype Mat Defender, that's one of our guys out in Austria, and he's making games, and he's done some game jams to get other young game developers working on games for us, games that have healthy messaging, games that don't demonize anyone, including whites.
Fantastic. And let's, it looks like Jacob came back again with another $3. Thank you so much again, Jacob. This was $3. The first was $5. He writes here, consumed a large amount of Japanese games when younger, as opposed to Western, which assisted fostering the core ideas of nationalism, which was absent in Western entertainment. Well, isn't that interesting? So he's playing the Japanese games, and they were teaching their people, or not necessarily teaching, I guess it was just natural for them to be nationalistic. And so he became nationalistic as a result. Any thoughts on that, IE?
Yeah, I definitely think I could see that depending on what games he was playing, you're definitely going to get different messaging in Eastern and Western games. I mean, I definitely played a lot of Eastern games growing up. I don't know if that's necessarily why I'm here ultimately in the cosmic sense, but it could be.
Well, very interesting. Thank you very much for that, Jacob. Now I'm going to swivel around this way, and we're going to look at Cash App here for a moment. And we have the great, the one and only DB Cooper, who financially gifted $9 today. Thank you so much, good brother. And please give my best to that wonderful little Jason running around the house. That's DB Cooper. And we have here next, folks, get ready to get out your raucous emojis for the one and only another great champion, Quebec, who financially gifted 50 US dollars. Thank you so very much. And he writes, simply hail. Well, big hail. Promethean hails back to you, good brother. That is most generous. And he wasn't done. So get out your raucous emojis again if you thought you were going to tuck them back away into your pockets. Quebec back again. This time 75 US dollars. 75 US dollars. Thank you so very much, brother. And he writes, fighting for white well-being. Well, God bless you. And you absolutely are fighting for white well-being. One of our absolute best. I don't see any other questions unless I missed something in the chat, unless Mr. George has seen any questions. And if not,
Jilly is asking in D Live what the name of the gamer is again from Austria.
IE, what's the name of the gamer?
You're going to type in, like, if you look them up, KVLT Games. That's Cult Games.
Right. Yes,
And,
I've seen.
I think it's Roland. I think his name is. I forget, that might be his name. But he's done game jams. He's trying to get young, enthusiastic game developers, coders, artists who want to make the next generation of games, only not with mental poison in them. So I'm a big fan of him. I know I've had him on. I think I've had him on my stream. I know I've been on stream with him at least a couple times with American Krogan. So he made at least Hype Mat Defender, which is a very fun platformer type game if you like those.
Yeah, I know we have guys here working on projects as well. Video game projects.
Yes. And of course we have Western Kind Games. Yep. The one and only, now everyone knows, For Null. And you can go over to my website, nowhiteguilt.org, and you will find there is a tab there to play that game. And it looks like we just had Jacob back for another $5. Thank you so very much, Jacob. He writes, funny, he brings up, is that Heim Defenders game jams. I participated in them. Very worthwhile community. Westmen need more counterculture. We absolutely do. Any thoughts on that, i.e., and maybe counterculture by way of gaming?
Oh, definitely. I definitely see a real possibility for a sort of, a group of developers creating things that, while the industry and the people in charge won't look forward to, a lot of gamers might. If we make stuff that has healthy messaging, but also is just fun to play, which you need that combination, that could be a real sort of movement online. It could be a good thing. I'm glad to hear he was in the Hype Mat Jam. But yeah, it's, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but Hype Mat is something like Homeland Defender.
Okay. Well, we have the great Mestizo with us, and he asks, or he says here, I remember a few years ago, despite anti-white putting out propaganda that compared the beauty of white and non-white women, the non-white females they used were almost always had Caucasoid facial features. So this was something that he recalled when the anti-whites were comparing beauty. And I'm sure they were finding white people to be the ugliest of all the races, I have no doubt. And he says that when he looked at those photographs, that he saw that the non-white women they used had Caucasoid or Western features, white features in them. Jonas had a couple of questions here. Let's see. You see any parallels and differences between situations in Japan and the West, i.e.?
Yeah, well, I mean, so you definitely have some of the same conversations happening there as here, in terms of, oh, well, we need to let in immigration from a foreign biospirit. Oh, we shouldn't do that. We should do that. Right now, I mean, if you look at the population, it's like overwhelmingly Japanese. So it's not nearly as advanced there as it is in the United States or South Africa or Germany even. You know, Japan is extremely Japanese so far. But, you know, I remember when I got there, I spoke to the father of the family who I was staying with. And I said, yeah, you know, I saw some of the news about the protests against America's base in Okinawa. I said, I saw a lot of Japanese protesters there. And he said, they're not Japanese immediately, because they're largely not Japanese. Okinawa is one of the least Japanese places in Japan. A lot of Chinese immigrants, Korean immigrants, Indian immigrants, like from India, not Native American. So, you know, you are starting to see people noticing things like, hey, we don't all think the same. It's not just, you know, some superficial difference in skin color or something. I mean, heck, a lot of them have the same skin color as a lot of us. And I mean,
Yeah.
It's not hard to tell the difference between us.
So very true. So very true. And fantastic answer there. Well, it looks like we have come to the end of a magnificent tap, ladies and gentlemen. IE is going to be back without question very soon. It's been a glorious, and we just had White Student Transmission just popped in. Thank you so very much, good brother. Financially gifting $5 US. Thank you, brother. And he writes, for a folk tithe. Well, thank you so very much. And we deeply appreciate all of your service to White Wellbeing. We know that you are another one of our champions. And I can see the great game designer and I guess we could say white positive activist extraordinaire, Fornull, is in the live chat moderating as well. Great to see you, good brother. IE, this has been magnificent. And I had a lot of fun, and definitely we'll have you back very soon. What are your final thoughts, and where can folks find you?
Well, if you search Intellectual Embargo, you'll see my YouTube channel. I also have a link tree. If you click on the link tree, I have that on my Twitter page. If you look on the Twitter profile, it's for like my website. It's the link tree, and that takes you everywhere. I haven't been banned off there. I know we had some problems with them and the anti-whites at Linktree. At the end of the day, you know, if you want to know what I'm about, if you haven't watched my videos, you know, what I'm really trying to do is to put certain things into perspective for you with these complex topics, anyone who watches, but also to phrase them in a way where you might be able to steal talking points from it. You know, let's say you already know some of the things I'm going to talk about. I might be able to phrase it in a way where you'll be like, I can use that the next time I'm talking to someone, or, you know, the way I'm going to explain to my kids, I might use it this way, because I try and keep things really basic. Like I don't want to get caught up in abstractions. Like people will pile abstraction on top of abstraction, and you can't tell where they're going. It gets confused and inaccurate. I really try and really drill into these issues with like a laser. So we don't pull in a bunch of unrelated ideas when we're trying to talk about one topic. But when I get my setup, when I'm not living with my family here for a second, probably later this month, and I can set up my computer and everything, actually have my microphone instead of my phone. I'll be making my videos again. I got things in the works. I got multiple scripts written. Might do some collaborations with other creators. So if you are looking to collaborate with me, you can also reach out to me. Easiest place to reach out to me is DM me on Twitter or email. You can check my email on my YouTube page. I believe it's Intellectual Embargo at Proton Mail. But that's about it.
Thank you, brother. Mr. George.
Well, once this episode is put on our website, theafterparty.tv, all of Intellectual Embargo's links will be on the specific post for today's episode. So you'll be able to find them there as well. Please bookmark that website. It is the collection, the catalog of the shows Jason and I do, and some other videos as well, some other content from the community. And my own site is thegreatorder.com. You may know I make music now. So
Does indeed.
Recently did a live performance, just an acoustic out in nature, new song, The Girl from Galway Bay, a couple of weeks ago. Song that isn't super new, Horizon, came out in early June, but there's a new video for it that also came out a couple of weeks ago. And of course, we're still pushing What's in Us that came out this summer. That is the one with the mashup of imagery going on right now, all the things going on in the world, the convergence of awakenings, all of the things people are concerned about. And we've been working to get these, like Jason was saying with Intellectual Embargo's videos before, been working to get that video to parallel scenes, parallel subcultures, parallel or tangential, sharing some overlap, but curious. You might think in the United States context of MAGA people, patriot people. There's definitely room for people questioning the COVID agenda right now, because even though that might not be specifically about heritage, there's a huge opportunity there still as more people see they're being lied to. And when people realize they're being lied to and they're being manipulated, some of them at least will say, well, what else have I been lied to about? How else have I been manipulated? So as dire as things are, and I know people feel alone, I know there's a lot of pressure. It's heavy when you look at what's going on. And I recommend taking breaks from social media, because you have to pace yourself and you can't be feeding. We talked about what you feed in your mind and your spirit today. You can't be feeding that stuff unless you're following people who are doing it the right way. But all of us tend to sometimes, we all can slip into it, of retweeting and sharing things where, you want to know what's going on, but at some point it's like, do I need to see the 1,000th time that someone was attacked violently? It's
right.
You're not learning anything new, and all you're doing is feeding something that's extremely stressful and negative into yourself. And for my money, I think it's more helpful to say, be realistic, step up, not deny those things, know that they're going on, but you say, how can I shore myself up so that I have the strength, the character, the positive energy to do things forward looking, like Jason was saying earlier in the middle of the show. So that is my parting words for today. Again, thegreatorder.com is the catalog of all I do, music and otherwise. But Intellectual Embargo was great speaking to you. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to more. Jason, please take us out. Everyone, have a good weekend. Stay safe. We'll talk soon.
Yes, indeed. Everyone do stay safe. And a big thank you to everybody who participated in the live chats, the multiple live chats that we had going on today. We really appreciate that engagement. This is about learning. We are teaching each other and growing and improving together. Thank you to everyone. A big thank you to everyone who financially gifted today. And all of those folks, you so many names of great champions in service to white well-being, those who are producing content, spreading content, financially gifting, moderating. We appreciate and love every single one of you. And so thank you, every single one of you. We had the great Fornell doing some moderating today, and we thank you for that, dear brother. It was a magnificent time, as it always is. A big thank you to Mr. George and everything he does to make the TAP episodes entertaining and educational, and our great guest, Intellectual Embargo. Again, thank you so very much for coming on. And folks, we are looking forward to seeing you all again next time.